Hola, compañeros. Welcome to DiversiTV, the Latino perspective. I'm Mark Harris, and I'll introduce our guest for tonight shortly. If you're just tuning in for the first time, despite this being part of the distance learning department, this is not yet a class, but it will be. We are taping episodes for future use, and you are part of that. So if you have feedback for us, you'll be given an email address to email your feedback in. But let's quickly cut to slide and basically talk about the DiversiTV mission. Basically, it's to illuminate everyday diversity issues and give the mic and the camera to those who don't always get it for whatever reason, and to illuminate issues behind the mic and outside the mic where people don't necessarily know about them. And the definition of diversity is basically encompassing Lane Community College's definition, which is not only monolithically within race, gender, and the usual things, but also the depths of discussion, which we'll hope to get into tonight as every night. Our schedule, we've started out as we always do, Native American, October 3rd, the Anglo perspective on the 10th. Last week we did African in America. This week is the Latino perspective. Next week will be Asian. November 7th will be the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, two-spirit community. November 14th, disability. November 21st, youth. We'll look at class issues on the 28th. And December 5th, the last show of the season, actually this term, spirituality and religion. Our guest tonight is Judith Castro, Transiciones, Eugene Public Library, and Central Latino America. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have 3 or 4 jobs. Do you want to briefly describe them? I mean, a woman in the intersection, some might say the crosshairs, but let's hope not think that part out too loud.
Well, first of all, I work at Lane Community College. I'm the Transiciones advisor in the women's program. And starting this winter, I will be facilitating a Transiciones class. It's a Women in Transitions class in Spanish. And so right now I'm preparing for that and getting trained and looking forward to teaching that in the winter.
Okay.
It starts January the 12th. It's on Saturdays from 9 till 11, so 2 hours every week.
What's the goal of that particular class? How does it mirror the one that's for non-Spanish speaking populations, and how is it different?
Well, the goal of Transiciones is to welcome Latina students into LCC and get them acquainted with Lane Community College and everything that is available here. We want to make them feel comfortable, help them access resources, and just guide them through that process of entering into community college. It's also to help people make a transition into this culture and in an educational setting, which is frequently difficult. And so the classes are really similar, but we have culturally appropriate material, so we discuss immigration and the changes that people undergo when they've immigrated. We discuss racism, we discuss the intersection of racism and sexism, and just how those things intersect and interact with and affect people's ability to become educated, and what barriers are created out of those situations. So.
Okay, and possibly how to overcome them. Because, I mean, if you advance those as subjects for discussion as part of a class, then the goal is obviously to overcome them or make people aware of them.
Exactly. And we're a support system. As an advisor, I help students and answer whatever questions that they have. We're part of the women's program, and that's what the women's program does for women on campus and prospective LCC students. And my role is for the Spanish speakers, although the women's program helps anyone.
Right.
And so.
So is there a similar function with the library?
Oh, that's completely different.
Okay.
I am an early literacy outreach specialist for the Eugene Public Library.
Okay.
And my role there is to to coordinate the El Gozo de Leer program and the Read for Joy. It's the same program, one's in English and one's in Spanish. And our goal is to reach mothers who are pregnant or up to the age of 1, with babies up to the age of 1. And so we do home visits and group presentations in order to reach to these families. So
early literacy. So whether mom is literate in either language or multiple languages, because to be clear, there are people, as we've talked before, people who are native who Spanish is their second language, right? And so if their original native indigenous language was not written, if they're not Olmec or, they don't read, I don't know if there are books in Nahuatl, but, if they're not literate in their indigenous language, they might not be literate in Spanish. And so then our first introduction to literacy is now in what? Spanish, English?
The books that we give out, because we bring families a gift bag full of board books for their babies. It's a one-time home visit or a one-time group presentation. So the books are either in Spanish or in English.
Okay.
And although I have seen a few bicultural families and tried to mix the books for them, when I talk, I really go a little bit in depth with people about if you don't read, that's fine right now. The importance is that you need to sit there with your child, speak with them, sing with them, just make gestures, make it a cuddly, warm time. And just go to the library, use the puppets, look at the books, make up your own story. Because it really isn't necessary to be literate yet in order to help children learn those early literacy skills.
Right.
And that's what people are frequently shocked about. They think that they have to sit there and do it in this very strict way, but it's more about engaging their children, spending time with them, shutting the television off, giving them real experiences, like going out and checking out leaves or discussing trees, and so I include all of those things as part of early literacy. And we talk a lot about where they've come from and what education level, and how really there's no shame in anything, that it's the most important part is to really sit with your child. And I can speak from experience that my mother, I didn't realize this till I was in college, my mother really isn't that literate. She has a very, very early literacy level, probably at about 1st grade, 2nd grade in Spanish. And she really taught me to read. I mean, she did her best. She created stories, she would sing music and just make it a lot of fun, and consequently, she really helped me any which way she could. I did have barriers later on, but we worked through those. So
it seems like then, particularly when we were talking about my conversation, for example, with Carmen when we were doing cultural competency work with the county, basically saying, okay, Mexicans are not monolithic, or, you're quote unquote Mexicans, right? So one of the populations that Centro, for example, was dealing with was Oaxacans, who basically talk in stories, right? So that makes perfect sense to be able, I remember my kids, would ask me to tell them stories and not read them stories. They made a distinction. Yeah, we like you to read us stories, but make one up. So it's about developing the imagination before you're literate to kind of capture those things, those literacy pieces, and get that mind going so that when you now put a concept like a leaf or a fairy or a river or whatever to paper, that's the thing that we were talking about, and those pre-literacy skills. So that's actually very cool that that's happening and that the city does that.
We are.
Wow. Impressive, though that might not be impressive to some people. I think that's actually old school, the way things used to be done on Turtle Island, welcoming the newcomers by, giving them the language, because you're welcome here as long as you can contribute to the vibe. So what about Centro?
On Centro Latino, I work with a few different programs there. Basically, I do a parenting group that happens every Sunday, and all parents are welcome. It's a free program, And it's any age group, because some programs were more specific in the past, or different agencies have more age restraints. But Centro takes any age from pregnancy all the way through whatever. And so I work with the parents to help them really connect with their kids and work through their own childhood and healing some things backwards, so that way they can learn how to really effectively connect with them and relate to their kids in such a way that the child will, try to understand where the parent is coming from, probably reduce discipline problems, increase school success, help families understand the role of racism. And I teach from a curriculum called Crecer. It's make parenting a pleasure, and it was created by birth to 3. But they allow space for augmenting things culturally, and that's what I do with the...
Well, you kind of have to.
You have to, you really do. It's a great curriculum, it's a great basis to work from. It talks about self-care, which is something that I believe a lot of people that are immigrants and non-immigrants also, Latinos, have a hard time with. We've just been shown you have to do a lot of hard work constantly, and think of everyone else but yourself first, and so people get really run down. And so that's a skill that they learned, and along with just positive discipline and understanding the stages of development, which is some really, really crucial information to have, so that people don't make assumptions about why their children are doing certain behaviors that might seem like misbehaviors, but they're actually developmentally appropriate. And so I teach parents how to support their children through different stages, and it can be challenging because people have really concrete ways of looking at children and their roles in the family, and so we talk about that as well. And so that's one of the programs I do at Centro. The other one is I run a soon-to-be Wednesday play group, and I allow moms to come and we spend time together just talking and sharing issues and just letting the mothers vent a little bit and get support and pick up referrals. And the other program that I do is called Mujeres en Poder, that's Women in Power. And that's on Thursday nights. It's a closed group, and it's a year-long commitment. And currently we have 12 women committed for a whole year to that program. We're heading into our 5th month, and every month we discuss a different topic surrounding oppression and how to work with it so that you can be more empowered.
Women in power. So one of the viejas in the comunidad, one of the, shall we say, elders, said that you're one of the up-and-coming leaders. Now, I don't know that you would describe yourself like that. Okay. Look. She giving you props out of respect. You gotta at least accept the mantle and say, okay, I hope I can grow into this shawl here. But, well, when you think about what you're doing, all right, and talking about access to being effective, I mean, that's what power is, the ability to be effective. And you're at a number of crossroads. So as an up-and-coming leader, what would you say to people out there, what would be one of the things that you would want them to understand if you had to say it? And we're not limited to 25 words or less. But you were born in Connecticut. You're a Cubana, Peruviana. What are your bloodlines? What is your cultural heritage? Okay, you're a citizen, so. Here you are, you're working with people who might not be citizens and empowering them. How did you come to do that?
It's been a long journey.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm still, being mentored and while mentoring, and it's a really beautiful place to be. It's been a long haul. I was born and raised in Connecticut, Stamford, Connecticut, in the 70s, and my parents were immigrants. My mother came from Cuba. My father immigrated from Peru in the late 60s. My mother came as a Cuban refugee, and my father on a scholarship from a community college. And they met in church. They're Catholic. And, and so then I was born in the 70s. They came from two really different worlds and didn't really understand Connecticut very much. And their cultures were extremely different, sometimes even extremely opposed. I don't know how they ever got together, but so it was
the opposites attract thing, maybe.
They do, for a while at least.
Yeah, right.
So I grew up in Connecticut, and it was really, really hard, and I didn't realize how hard it was until I left Connecticut. It was, we had some of the most quote-unquote diverse school systems in this country, even at the time, because of the immigrants that had come there from all different places. There were a lot of factories from the 20s onward, and they started leaving in the 70s, along with all the other factories in the United States.
Et cetera.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so what we were left with was a lot of, just different people scrambling and poverty and just people trying to move up in the world. And so I did grow up with a lot of different kinds of folks from all over the world, and that was really, really a great experience. They were really good friends. But at the same time, we were all faced with extreme racism, and it was very silent. It just happened by segregating people. Like we had school systems where they had 1, 2, 3, 4 group, and 1 was the best, and 2 was the second best, and 3, well, you weren't really sharp, and 4, you were really dumb. And so, I mean, they didn't say it like that, but it was obvious to us where people were being placed, and they had very rigid testing systems every 2 to 3 years, starting in the 3rd grade. And so I was never really looked at as intelligent or bright, I don't think. Part of it is I'm a kinesthetic person, learner, and I think that's harder for teachers didn't teach like that at that time, and some still don't.
Many still don't, right, yeah.
And so it was hard to engage me at times. But also, I was really going through a lot as a kid. My father was abusive with us, and so I survived domestic violence, and a lot of times I was just spacing out. And so on top of, having the pressures of racism and trying to conform to society and trying to figure out family life, it was just, everything was really, really hard.
Well, the counselor in me would say, well, you're not spacing out. You're actually non-verbally processing.
Yes, this
is
true.
Because it's kind of like, not that I have this debate with my psychiatrist father, but, the latest thing that heated me up is, the revelation that they're giving and prescribing, first, they're diagnosing 3-year-olds as being bipolar.
That's crazy.
And then giving them medication. So, wait a minute. How is a 3-year-old bipolar, 1? And 2, how do you justify giving pills to them, right? So, if we look at, wait a minute, if you can get a diagnosis of a 3-year-old at, they're being abused. Okay, so giving them a pill is not going to cure the abuse.
Oh, they don't want to deal with the
right?
parents.
Okay, so it's the perennial question about, especially in terms of racism, language barriers, systemic racism, because testing is not necessary to help you. It's basically to put you in a track.
Exactly.
Right. So.
And their tracks are really stiff.
And the tracks are really stiff. So the piece could be about looking at how do you make a sane adjustment to a situation that's insane. And so a lot of time, when there's no guidance, not even an acknowledgement by the system that your situation exists, right? So yeah, you're going to space out because you're thinking about, well, I can't deal with algebra or my times tables, when mommy beat daddy or me, or daddy beat mommy or me, or, we didn't get breakfast this morning or whatever. You have to look at that. And so with this immigrant question even as well, even though you're not, but you're going to be categorized as that by a school system, right? Even though you're bilingual, you're born here, you're a citizen. Oh, well, let's put her in ESL classes, right? Because Castro, oh, you're Cuban. Oh, there is all that. And One of the things I've always admired about Cuba is that the liberation struggle there that started even in the 19th century, right? That,
Early on.
early on, which, caused people like Churchill to say, well, I don't really care about what's happening with niggers on some island. I mean, that's a quote.
Yeah.
So, Churchill, we name high schools after him, but,
Yeah.
this guy is not that cool for people of color, but
No.
maybe they don't think about that. But talk about Cuba, because it occupies, a special place in terms of looking at the history. Well, if we look at immigration issues, as a microcosm, and the conditions on the island. I mean, you taught me something the other day that I didn't know about. So go ahead, talk about Cuba.
Well, I want to say that, and then along my journey that was my big transition point. I went to Cuba. I visited my family for the first time at 16, and I don't know what, I just felt moved for some reason. Suddenly, I really wanted to meet my family. I had no interest in them before, which was because of internalized racism. And suddenly I really wanted to know my grandmother. I wanted to know who my cousins were, my uncles and aunts that are there, my second cousins. And I went to Cuba for the first time and completely fell in love with it. And it opened up my world, because I was coming from this very conflicted world where I had, I was challenged by materialism, being from an immigrant family, just domestic violence, all these factors, that I was living with in Connecticut. And a very cold culture in Connecticut overall. It's very, just people closing their doors and not a lot of neighbors interacting. And I went to Cuba. I took a Greyhound down to Miami, and I flew all by myself in high school. And went to Cuba and met my grandmother at first, who kind of scared me a little bit. And then my loving uncle and cousins and aunt, and they were just wonderful. I mean, they just took me in. Cuba was going through a period of time of extreme economic crisis because the fall of Russia and the Soviet Union, and so they were trying to figure out a new economy. And what I saw in Cuba was extreme generosity between people. Life. People knew how to joke about things, even though their situation was hard, even though people didn't have a lot of food. They would share whatever they had. They would try to make it work. And it was really, really, really touching to me. I'd never experienced such generosity and such openness in my entire life.
I mean, that's actually a reality, but also a stereotype, at least among people of color, that, poor people of color who have nothing are really generous. Rich white people are stingy and close the door. And it's a stereotype, but it often bears out, with the whole Katrina thing, Kanye West saying, well, if Katrina hit Connecticut, the response would be different, wouldn't it?
It would be very different, I think. Or at least maybe there would be preferences among who is generous.
Yes, right.
And I also think that Cuba has created a climate of less materialism, because the government controls the television and they don't allow commercials in. And so even though it is becoming more and more materialistic because they have more frequent access to travel and people coming in, bringing in those ideas, Cuba still is by and large generous. Whereas I think people here who are in poverty and maybe people of color have become people who hoard a little bit more now because of the competition and the infighting. Right. And all the propaganda that has been really pushed on us, especially heavily since the 80s. That's really when it started. Heavily. So I think the Cuban government has been good to censor our television and our media as best as they can, because there are people in Miami who project into Cuba. And so while Cubans are conflicted internally about the government overall, they do recognize that things there are much better than in most of Latin America, actually pretty much the rest of Latin America. I mean, everyone has health care. My cousin, she'll probably kill me, but she won't see this, had a free nose job done in Cuba just because she did not like her nose. Did not have to have any other explanation.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And very openly, and it wasn't a big deal. Women have access to all kinds of birth control, abortion, healthcare, everything. I mean, even when foreigners come and they're sick, you go and you get treated. I mean, people can
Michael Moore Sicko showed us that.
Sicko tells it all, and it's really real. Now, they may not have the most beautifully painted hospitals or facilities or the latest technology, but they definitely have really intelligent doctors, and they send people out all over the world. Cubans are very humanitarian. They care about the rest of the world. They also are very politically aware. They're always shocked at what's happening outside because not a lot of people get to travel because there is poverty. Yeah. And the government used to be more restrictive, but now it's allowing people to travel more, mostly because they're afraid to lose people to other countries and brain drain
is an issue.
Exactly.
But it is ironic in some I mean, not that I'm going to defend the right-wing point of view at all, but people do attempt to leave the island for whatever reasons, and but there is some irony that again, when Katrina hit, okay, they were sending a contingent of Cuban doctors and health workers that weren't allowed into the country, while American was basically neglecting the country. As soon as American citizens were being neglected by their government, and the Cubans were sending medical teams, or wanted to send medical teams, which weren't allowed into the country. Same thing with 9/11. Sending a contingent there.
And Cuba also has a wonderful program for students of color, or anyone who's of color who lives in the United States who's under the age of 30. They will. I know, sorry.
I want to become a doctor in Cuba for free, yeah.
You might be able to write a letter and they might make an exception.
You got any connections there?
My last name is Castro, but I don't, unfortunately. But if you're under the age of 30 and you're a person of color, you can get a free medical education in Cuba from beginning till end. You just have to have a few science classes, and you can take those in a community college.
Do you have to be bilingual first?
You do not.
What?
They can help you with that
They'll
as well.
teach, wow, you can learn Spanish?
They do.
Because the reason that I was considering taking up that deal, right, because, the continuing issue with African Americans and reparations, I'm not going to get a reparations check from America, but I'd be willing for America to pay my way through medical school. Now, if Fidel Castro, the communists, will pay an American's way through medical school for free, the only thing that you have to do then is basically agree to work in a third world country, and that includes poor, of color America. I'll take that deal, because that's a better deal than the Americans are giving me.
And they actually, exactly, encourage you to work in America with the poor communities.
Yes.
That's really what they want you to do, is just give back to your country of origin.
Yeah.
And that is such a good deal. I mean, what a basic reparation, I mean, a free education. I mean, it's not even enough, but it should be at least a piece of property as well.
I want to talk about a difficult subject. Not for you in particular, because you're a citizen, right? So people leave Cuba, right? And we were talking about, the whole Elian thing, because immigration, continues away from the island, brain drain or not. People do attempt to leave. Government doesn't like them to do that, but they do, and many are successful, and there are many tragedies at the same time. Basically, I want to highlight kind of like the immigration policy that gets interestingly bifurcated in terms of Cubans.
And there is a history of this.
There's a whole history of that. If we take Elian Gonzalez, that whole situation, so as we were talking about, what a lot of people don't know, but this was reported in John John's magazine, so those of you who are old enough to even remember who John was, John F. Kennedy Jr. had a magazine called George, which basically reported on that there were 4 survivors in that Elian Gonzalez episode, where the folks left on a boat, and Elian's mom, I believe it was, and took Elian and his younger sister, the boat's engine failed, and so there they are. They're a mile offshore, floating, and so dawn comes and they make it back to shore. And the dad says, "No, you're not taking my baby girl. Just just stay here." So they took off again the next night, and basically, boat capsizes, and all they have for life preservers is old inner tubes. So Elian and his mom are on one. And then this woman and her boyfriend on another. So Elian's mother, of course, we know, she gave up and she drowned. Elian's clinging to the inner tube, gets rescued, and this woman and her boyfriend get rescued. Now, here's where the story gets interesting to me now, because I wasn't aware of this policy. So any Cuban, any Haitian, any person entering the United States, there's a feet wet policy, which if you make it to shore, you get to stay. And I thought that was all Cubans. But it turns out, no, it's not all Cubans. I first thought, well, Latin America is has a third African blood. You were telling me it's 60% in Cuba, right? At
least.
And so the story that was told in George, they used this gesture where, the woman was blanca, Latina, right? So light skin, and the boyfriend was, as they, pointing to, here, dark-skinned, right? Like my color, Moreno, Zambo, whatever the term is, and both of those terms have been used, right? So normally, a dark-skinned Cuban would be sent back, just like a Haitian, right? So what kind of policy then favors light-skinned Cubans over dark-skinned Cubans? And wait, I thought they're Cuban. We want to make great public relations because they're escaping the communist country and they're coming to America, land of the free. But no, if you're dark-skinned, we don't want you. So is that coming from the Cuban community? Is that coming from America? I could make a case either way.
I think it's both.
It's probably
I honestly
both.
think it's both. I mean, there's such racism in both communities, here and in Cuba itself as well. The Cubans in America and the Cubans here, and our government, obviously.
So you can make a case, because I want to explore this more with you then. Okay, our immigration policy is in fact favoring light-skinned people. Right?
It is.
So, racist Russians get to come, but South Africans do not. Anti-racist South Africans do not. Anti-racist Haitians, etc., do not. But, and the reason I bring up the racist Russian is because it's a Russian immigrant that killed Ennis Cosby, an American citizen, being a doctor in Bel Air. Okay, which is wealthy Los Angeles. So, this Russian immigrant kid, they are careful not to say, whether he's an illegal immigrant or a legal immigrant, but he said, well, I killed a nigger, the nigger happened to be Ennis Cosby. So who let him in? And so to whose advantage is it to have racists come in and kill American citizens?
And it's an extreme racist and classist issue. I mean, it is a travesty what is happening, because I've heard so many European people that I've met, oh yes, I had no time, just applying, and I got in, and I'm getting citizenship, and they just zip right through, and then they're white, white Europeans, and then people who are not white, who are darker skin, and then there's a whole shade spectrum getting rejected. You can't even come visit a family member, just making you jump through all kinds of hoops, financial hoops, paperwork hoops, just things that make it extremely difficult to come in, even visit a family member, let alone stay longer.
Yeah.
And so it's really terrible what's happening. It's just really, really sad. I mean, I've heard that a lot. When I was living down in Florida, after I left Connecticut, I moved down to Florida and went to the university there at Florida Atlantic University. There were so many Haitian folks there immigrating, just out of this desperate necessity. The economic conditions in Haiti are terrible. And people were getting turned away, just the same, even with their feet wet, coming here. Yeah. And it's really, really clear. And Cubans often like to think of themselves as predominantly white. I think a lot of people, not all Cubans, but there's extreme racism in Cuba, and there is such discrimination. There really is. I mean, They talk terribly about Afro-Cubans, even though they like to say, oh, no, we're not racist. But there clearly is a division of labor in Miami, how they look at African Americans that live here already, you know, Haitian folks coming in and Afro-Cubans. And I think people who are Afro-Cubans are in a really hard place because they often feel that rejection from both communities, you know. Yeah. It's really, really tough. And now you have the whole situation that's happening with Mexico and Central America. It's the same pattern. It's the same pattern that's happening, and it really needs to change.
I mean, the contradictions of, okay, so, you know, when we talk about immigration, and I mentioned just because it was, well, not just because it was a Jay Leno comedy bit, but it was a Jay Leno comedy bit, that the second largest illegal immigrant population in California is white people, Canadians and Europeans. I mean, same definition, illegal. You overstay your visa, you whatever, and you're here illegally. And, you know, he made a joke about, well, you know, how many are leading posses looking for people to go, eh? They don't, right? And so when we're talking about, you know, out of that 12 million figure that's bandied about, you know, it's like, well, no, that ain't just Mexicans. That's 500,000 white people that are here illegally. So again, you know, nobody's organizing posses to get rid of them.
Nope.
So again, why not have an immigration policy that's not racist, unless of course it is in the interest of the United States to remain a racist country, which...
It is in the interest of the United States to remain a racist country and to keep labeling people of color as a problem. Because then if you can distract all the other ignorant people, some of them who are white and some of them who are people of color themselves who've bought into that and internalized the racism as well, just believing that immigration is the problem and not the economic policies that are being chosen that are exploitative for everyone, workers here and workers everywhere. You know, if people realize what was happening, there would be a revolution tomorrow because we would have international work policies which said you cannot pay someone anything less than X amount, and an X amount would look like at least $15 an hour. So, I mean...
Especially if the work is valued at that level, and, you know...
Which I don't think anyone should get paid under that. And so, you know, I think it's really in the interests of the government and the people who do have, not all the government, but a lot of the big players up there and who have the purse strings and the business people, and to just keep everyone ignorant and infighting. And it's a tactic that's happened since the beginning of this country, you know. We do not want people to understand international politics or what's happening and how things are related. Everything is separate. So, right, interestingly, in addition to speaking of immigration policies, something that the Bush administration did several years ago was to forbid my generation from going to Cuba anymore to visit family at all. So my mother's generation can go. So if you have someone who is a mother or a father or a husband or wife or a child there, you can go visit, or brother or sister, immediate family, what is called immediate family under this definition.
But our families are extended families.
Our families are extended families up to second and third cousins and more, neighbors included. And so, and fictitious kin. But so I'm not allowed to visit my family anymore, and the fines are extreme, and I think it's 10 years in prison for going to see your family. And this goes for anyone who touches ground in Cuba. That's why they're trying to get Michael Moore fined. I think it's $1 million fine, or...
Well, he's got good lawyers, I guess. But, you know, again, the issue, then I could be fined for becoming a doctor.
You could be. And they're trying to cut the program back. They're trying to only allow the students, the Bush administration is trying to allow the students who are in Cuba finish the program, and they're making it progressively difficult for more students to join in. I mean, it's just appalling what's happening. And the idea is to sever the connection to Cuba so that you can portray it in a certain way, and again, keep people divided and conquered. You know, the whole idea that, you know, putting Castro as evil, and that these people running the government are dictators and terrible, you know, just inhumane people who, you know, starve their people, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, Oh, we don't do that. No. Oh. We don't starve our people. So what is your experience of the community in Eugene?
Eugene is an interesting place. Before here, I lived in Florida, and I lived there for about 8 years, and it's been such a mix. And when I left Florida, I worked in the projects for many years, and I found my family there. I have certain people adopted me in the community, and felt really welcomed. And then I came here, and I expect...
Why did you come here?
A mixture of things. I would say I was feeling a need to really get out of Florida. I was feeling stifled. It's a really terrible tourist environment. They try to project this really exploitative, they do a good job at it too, exploitative towards women, exploitative towards people of color, like everyone's a servant, basically. All people of color are looked at as servants, and women are just these sex objects, and you have, you know, on the highways and everywhere, billboards, half-naked women followed by, you know, anti-abortion signs. And so this is what Florida is like, and I really did not want to raise a family in Florida, even though I have dear, dear friends there that are great people. It was hard to leave them behind, and there's such segregation in Florida. It really is the Old South and the Northeast. Yeah, right. And so I wanted to live in a new place, and I intuitively went online and started looking at different places and sensing where might be a good home, and then we came to visit on our honeymoon and fell in love with Eugene. I just love all the green colors and the flowers and the parks and just the outdoors and the hills, because Florida's very flat. Yeah, right. And the idea that we could maybe go hiking. No hurricanes.
Just rainstorms.
Just earthquakes, potentially.
Just earthquakes, potentially. Right. They didn't tell you it was a southern state in the Northwest, but that's okay.
They did not mention that. I found that out.
Well, you know, that's why you have black people to point that history out.
Yes, and the Native community here has been really aware of it. I have to say that while I suffered racism in Connecticut and in Florida, it was such a special brand in Eugene. I think it really hit me hard here because I didn't expect it. Because Eugene has this really liberal guise and a lot of well-meaning.
It's the reputation.
Well-meaning
I was in LA. They said that. Oh, I thought Eugene was all liberal. Oh.
It's really not all liberal. And even the liberal people don't really understand the issue of race and class and discrimination. It's a very surface level understanding of how they oppress people. And so my first experience with my first job was really, really tragic. You know, I was in a community working for an agency well known in town, and they did very little to help. They did really practically nothing to help the people of color in the complex that were being threatened, death threats. And that was my introduction to the Human Rights Program and to some other angels in this town who really helped to sort through some of that stuff and really name it and eventually get out of there, because the administration wouldn't change their ways of dealing with people and cutting that sort of behavior out. And so, and in every agency practically in the past that I was hired in, to do work, to do diversity work, the agencies are often unwilling to change the ways they do things, and so what happens is that they keep giving the same kinds of services, which are to, you know, the dominant culture who is predominantly white here and who already has access to those resources, you know. And it's been really striking. So I love Eugene in so many ways, and in other ways it's been really, really difficult to be here, and it's just amazing. And there are some really amazing people doing some great work here, and I feel like I learn a lot by watching what they do and just seeing how you can really change things, but it is quite a struggle.
So, you know, you mentioned self-care. You brought it up. Right? Okay, so what kind of things, you know, when you're talking about immigrant populations, what kind of things do you teach them about self-care? Because it's one thing, you know, growing up here, making the transition here, dealing with racism firsthand as a target, then, you know, not that you're insulated from it, but you develop skills so that you can deflect most of the unconscious stuff and some of the deliberate stuff. But to come here not knowing, you know, to have this vision of America as this, you know, land of opportunity and freedom, and that's why you risk your life to come here, and you come here, and yeah, you may be making more money than in your home country, but you're still dealing with, you know, being segregated, disempowered.
And you're still poor because you're spending it quicker
Right.
because everything's more expensive, and
Right.
you're sending money back home.
And you're sending money back home. Yeah.
Because most people are doing that.
So what does self-care look like?
Self-care looks like really, really, really simple and earthy stuff. I mean, like taking a walk in the park. We have lots of parks you can walk for free. Just appreciating nature that's around. I mean, I really try to get people just to sit and reflect. Just slow down, take a slow walk. Go by yourself for a little while. Most people, you know, they're constantly engaged with people, especially I think the mothers, the women that I work with, are almost all of them are mothers. They are, you know, it's a very strict cultural norm not to leave your child behind.
Right.
And so even self-care of just taking a bath is a huge leap for people. Just feeling like you have the right to take a bath or take that walk on your own is a big step forward for them. I get people to try to color or write if they're comfortable writing. Coloring is great. You know, most people like to work with crayons even if they can't write or read, and so which quite a few people can, but some people can't, and so that's another good outlet for people. I talk about feeding ducks. People really like to go feed the ducks.
There's plenty of ducks. Ducks, geese, all kinds of other stuff to feed, right. And I guess the walking, it's still safe enough so that they're not being made more of a target, because, I mean, that is a consideration that I would consider about, you know, at the moment, you know, nobody's really messed with me walking around, you know, so that's okay. But, you know, one wonders, though, sometimes what it would be like. So walking, because, you know, one of the things in terms of dealing with racism and dealing with self-care is, whoa, yeah, you have to be able to talk about it with somebody. And talking about it is not complaining, it's just simply acknowledging that something happens, and happens constant enough so that you should expect that it's going to happen, or at least not be surprised, if a little disappointed. Because usually what happens, you know, for us working in organizations like the ones that we work in, it's like we're expected to give culturally competent service to white people, and, you know, and people of color too, but, you know, our white colleagues are not necessarily expected to give that same culturally competent service, well, not even to white people, but to other folks. And so that's pretty critical too.
There's so many pieces, really, and there's so much more that Eugene can do to make people feel welcome. Especially for people who have come here with such hard conditions, immigrating, risking their lives through deserts and starvation and God knows what else. You know, I've just heard such tremendous things. I mean, people who immigrate here are so brave. And it's out of necessity. Most people really do not want to be here. It's not that they don't love certain people here or friends that they make. It's that they are really used to their lives in their country, and coming to a strange land is very difficult, and especially when you're not welcomed and you have to work in oppressive conditions. So, you know, one of the things I try to do is in groups is really get people just to talk about their experiences, because then they start to realize it isn't their fault. This is a structural thing that's happening. Racism exists. They're walking into it, you know.
The structural piece is very important. So, I mean, mine is a minority viewpoint within the African American community, but I've seen it, okay? Mexicans welcomed us during slavery and protected us during slavery. Black people would escape from Texas and the South into Mexico, because Mexico's second president had eliminated slavery. So, you know, there's a Martin Luther King elementary school in Mexico, right? Because of black people who left not only during slavery, but in the 20s to escape American racism, right? So there was a play that was here in Eugene about 15, 20 years ago that basically said, look, people are coming north. This is like the Underground Railroad, okay? They're coming to freedom. They're escaping slavery, except instead of families doing it, it's corporations that are basically reinforcing slavery at various levels. So that's how we should, reframe this. They're escaping slavery to come to freedom, and what kind of people would not help runaway slaves? So you want to think about that. What kind of people don't help runaway slaves? Slavers. Okay, you're benefiting. These people are putting food on your table. They are contributing to your culture, very much so, and have good family values. They use drugs less. What else do you want?
They have healers.
They have healers. They're old school.
They heal us with their gentle spirit that they frequently come with, and really just beautiful connecting traditions. And the thing that I think is that I want for all leaders in this community is to really think about your roots and think about how, especially if you're for everyone, but if you're a leader, a community of color leader, then to really always reconnect with those roots and don't get brainwashed, and just constantly reflect on the struggles of your generations and connect in a way to heal those things, so that way you can work from that place and help other people reach into that place deeply within themselves and bring that out back. And that would be my hope for everyone.
Roots. Your roots sing you a story. So in our last few minutes, final thoughts?
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I hope that if anyone would like to speak further about what I've talked about or wants to know more about the programs that I help run, please call me. At Lane Community College, you can reach me at 463-3253, at the library, 682-5039, and at Centro Latinoamericano, 687-2667. And thank you so much for taking the time to invite me and have me here.
Yeah, we don't have to go out right away, but it's good that we did the little commercial because while people are still watching. Let's see, we did self-care. So I would ask you about if you were the director, because you are seen as a leader in the crossroads, even if you're not necessarily, at the forefront and on television all the time, and what is your opinion about this? What would be your perfect agency? If you were the executive director of the Dream Agency, what would that look like?
I have my dream agency.
Okay, so
I've had it for 5 years.
Okay.
It would be modeled after a Cuban TV show called Education for Everyone. It's actually a channel.
Education for Everyone. It's actually a channel. Okay. Okay.
And what the Cuban government does is allows people who want to learn whatever skill that they want to learn, and they don't want to go back to the university, or they don't want to start the university, you can study foreign languages, you can learn chess. If you have a child with a disability and you are the primary caretaker of that child and you want to teach that child instead of sending them to school, because they give you the option to homeschool or send the child to a school, then you could do all those things, and it goes along with you. The television prompts you and teaches you all those skills. And so it's quite amazing. For a whole year, my cousin was learning Italian, and every year they have a different language.
Talk about your distance learning.
It's amazing. It's all over the country. And so what I would like to see for Eugene, my dream agency, would be an education for everyone. I'd call it Educación para Todos. And it would be a place that had different courses. Nothing would be for credit, because I would want people to go there so that they could, really want to learn this subject area. And I would learn about, you know, the connection between multinational corporations exploiting in different countries. And I would do a cross panel on all different countries, not just Latin America, Asia, Africa, every country that's being exploited, the people are being exploited here, and show the relationships between things. So I would have lots of stuff on race, class, gender, and poverty, and just really doing a lot of political education, taxation education, or community organizing, how to protest, how to just different skill building that they could have. And then I would have holistic healers there for people to access for just a membership fee. So the community would contribute to this as a membership. And it's like belonging to a club like the DAC or the YMCA. And so...
you know, that the model you're describing does exist, actually.
Where?
You're talking about a modification slightly of what the Mondragon Corporation is. It's a multinational cooperative operating out of Basque Spain. 180 cooperatives organized around finance, manufacturing, distribution that has exactly that model. Hospital, university, technical school, you know, and how to work in a co-op, how to work cooperatively with people in a non-exploitive environment.
That's beautiful.
So, it is exportable. It's one of the things that we could possibly collaborate on, because, you know, we've been thinking about creating that kind of model for Lane Community College, because the state-sponsored educational institution in a state that's not sponsoring you is going to kind of fade away. Well, it was great having you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. If you've liked what you've seen tonight, please give us feedback. You can email us at liveclass@lanecc.edu, and if you want to reply, I or someone else will try and reply to you. This has been DiversiTV. Tune in next week for our Asian perspective on Halloween. Hopefully it won't be too scary for you. Thank you for watching.